do you do when your fast-paced work has started to break down your body? You're heading into your 40s and the sustainability of what you're doing just isn't going to be there anymore. Or maybe your marriage of 18 years is just not doing it for you. And it's, nobody's fault. Nobody's necessarily done anything wrong. You just know it's that you're both going in two different directions. Or maybe you even get a diagnosis of something as daunting as cancer, and you're only 42. Listen, today's guest is Sophie Deslauriers, and I want you to sit down and listen to this woman's story because all of those were a part of it, and the rich wisdom that she shares with women in midlife and how you can pivot out of anything and reinvent yourself is absolutely something you do not want to miss. So keep listening.
Welcome. This is Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I have a real treat for us today. Sophie Deslauriers comes from humble beginnings and has accomplished the unexpected in her life. She has thrived through some of life's major challenges like bankruptcy, divorce after 18 years of marriage, cancer, and having a baby in the pandemic. Up until now, she has been known for her expertise in sales and leadership. Previously, she mentored and coached executives and sales teams at some of North America's largest companies. Now she helps people reinvent themselves and heal after heartbreak. The work she does is rooted in radical responsibility, personal power, leadership, communication, and emotional intelligence. Welcome, Sophie, to Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. Are you on my mailing list yet? Because if you're not, you really should be. You want to join at learntoloveyourstory.com. If you scroll down, I'm giving away a freebie for you. Honestly, you know what it is? A free course. I sell online courses, but this is a course just for you. And it's about freeing yourself, letting go of what others' expectations and ideas are for you. You know, that nagging self-doubt in your head, it's usually fueled by your consideration of what others think of you over your consideration of what you think of you. And so I teach you in my video all about what is underlying that kind of self-doubt and how to get out of that conundrum. And I give you a workbook that goes with it that helps you to build the skill sets that you're going to need for that. So please make sure you're on my mailing list because at the least, you're going to get a free gift. And at the most, you're going to hear about all the things that we're doing on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving and learntoloveyourstory.com. And you don't want to be missing out on any of the new things that'll be coming your way. So my first question here on the podcast is always, tell us your story. We want to learn about what makes Sophie tick.
Okay, so I'll give you a highlight overview of my life, and if there's an area you want to unpack, just stop me and we'll unpack it a little bit if it's interesting
absolutely.
for you. I started off in pretty humble beginnings. My parents divorced when I was approximately 2, and my mom. I live in Canada. I live in Toronto. At the time, we were in Alberta. My mom moved us out. From there, she was in a pretty debilitating accident. She was electrocuted. So she
Oh
was a
gosh.
teacher. Yeah, she was a teacher at a daycare, and she was taking a picture with a camera that plugged into the wall when there was no
Mm.
ground. So her feet were wrapped around a metal stool. So unfortunately, it ground in her feet, which left her disabled for several years,
Wow.
actually.
Wow.
So that was a pretty impactful time in our life.
Yeah. And very humble beginnings. Like to have your mom be divorced, raising kids, and disabled, that's pretty significant
On
anywhere.
mother's allowance, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
On mother's
Yeah.
allowance, yeah. So I mean, actually, I think it's like equivalent to welfare, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's just a different
Mm-hmm.
name. So that, I mean, that was like a whole experience. It's like that was like trauma inducing as it was.
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit. She married an abusive alcoholic when I was 16. So there was a little bit of, trauma that came from that particular time in my life. And I'm just highlighting some of the traumatic experiences so that the viewers can see how I happen to be somebody who sees the opportunity within crisis. And so,
yeah.
and I'm not
Got some lived experience with it for sure. So
yeah. I put myself through university, went to university in Waterloo, took a generic environmental resource studies and business option.
Mm-hmm.
I opened up a college pro painting franchise there, which you basically start $10,000 in debt. So that was an interesting experience. It was one of my first experiences at business in that way.
Yeah.
I was an articulate young lady, as they thought, who could speak well. So they put me in a very wealthy neighborhood, but they didn't know as I was intimidated by people with money because I came from humble beginnings.
Yeah.
So that really wasn't a match. And then I was also petrified of heights. And so these homes that were more expensive were like the old Victorian 4-story homes. And so I'm 47 now. So this is about when I was 23. Back then, the man still like ruled the roof of the house, but specifically outdoor painting. Like that was more under his domain. So, there was me, a young woman, knocking on a door, talking to the man of the house, who would ask me to get on a ladder to go look at his soffits. Meanwhile, I'm petrified of heights. And
oh my gosh.
Like it just wasn't a fit.
No.
So I basically was going to start school with my student loan and then this business debt. So I got smart, hired a professional painter. He quoted the job, and then I would upsell it from there. So I learned all about subcontracting and
managing. Smart. I like it. It.
Learned about subcontracting and managing fixed costs rather than have variable costs. Didn't have to run my own team, like all that. So just that really worked.
Mm-hmm.
Finished university, met my ex-husband at university, got married. I was married for 18 years. We built a thriving business together, him, my brother, and I, environmental abatement company.
Okay.
And during that time, I had trained myself as a coach. So I was working with him in the business, and I was traveling across North America, working with Fortune 500 companies, teaching them leadership, sales, and communication skills.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty,
You've done a lot in 47 years. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks. That's what I'm told. I had a pretty flashy corporate job. I mean, it was my own business. I was a subcontractor, which worked for me for tax purposes, which is why I wanted it to be structured that way. But I mean, I was sitting at the tables with some of the most influential executives in North America. I mean, I was at their strategic tables. I was working with the VPs. I was working with the sales teams. I was working with companies like BlackRock and iShares and Bell and US Cellular and like all the big banks. And it was an interesting position. It really satisfied a side of me, which was like that sales business side of me. I got to use my communication and my listening skills, which was, it's universal for leadership, sales, coaching. I feel like that's the foundation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then about 38 years old, I burnt out pretty badly. And so I stopped working. At that pace, that makes sense, honestly. Yeah. I was flying everywhere. Like you don't really get bio breaks or water breaks. I mean, the corporate world is basically 8:30 to 5:30. And I was on my feet running 3-day facilitation training sessions. That's a lot. That is a lot. Mm-hmm. And I was often one of two women in the room, which means I'm with A-type personality men, which is great for the driving aspect of the business, but that's a completely different energy than how a woman leads. And it overemphasized those qualities that I had. So I was like out of alignment, out of balance.
That's a really great point. It would. Like, I think that energetically, there are differences there that are more conditioned to be, masculine or feminine. And if you're not if you're not counterbalancing that someplace else in your life, that too would lead to burnout in and of itself.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I was naturally a high achiever, a high performer, an A-type person. I naturally liked sales because I liked the hunt. I liked the close. Like, that was a hit for me. There's a whole addiction thing that we could talk about in regards to what that is. And so then to be surrounded by men basically 10 years my senior.
Yeah.
I up-leveled all of that to show up, right? And then to be the one at the front of the room training and teaching them and coaching them, it was I'm not going to say it was stressful, because it wasn't stressful in the sense like I didn't enjoy the work. It was taxing on my body. Like, I was running an Olympic race every day.
The adrenaline rush, right? Like, and I think, well, what's interesting is you said we could talk about that. Like, I think what we forget about is that is taxing physically on our bodies. And so burnout actually isn't like a bad thing. It's just our bodies got to detox from that. Like, it has kind of a limiting ability to do that at that pace for that long. And it'll shut you down and say, hey, we got to detox from this. We got to reset. And when we come out the other side of that, sometimes we're wiser, hopefully a little wiser for it. And so we might be able to structure our lives differently so that it's not such a unbalanced, way of living the way it was before.
Yeah. And there's mindset issues around that for me specifically, and I'm sure for other people. I'm not the only one. It's like how do you move from living your entire life that way, almost in survival mode, and then if you want to couple that with unprocessed trauma, and then you want to couple that with the addiction of sales, because I mean, there's lots of people who would argue there's an addiction to that close. It's like a hit.
Totally.
And then move to trying to have a more balanced life, like, without feeling like a failure or you're not performing. Like, it's a total reframe that needs to go on there. And
I agree.
Learning how to manifest in a lean back, surrendered position, learning how to manifest in a trust position rather than a hustle force position. Like, that transition for myself was one of the hardest transitions. I've been through some hard transitions. That was a tough transition for me.
Yeah. Say more about it, because I'd really like to hear, and I'm sure my listeners as well, how you journeyed through that, because what you're describing there is really this. I mean, I call this midlife crisis to a centered life thriving for a reason. I think a lot of women live in survival mode most of their early to mid adult life. And so there is, either the traditional kind of midlife crisis-y kind of an event, or we just burn out on something, or our social currency starts to tank, the wrinkles set in, the things that, we can't control start to set in. And so we're going to have to adjust. There's just no, two ways about it. And I think we're all seeking that answer. So tell us a little bit about how you journeyed through that.
Well, I mean, if you were like later in life, I learned about people pleasing, and then I learned about operating out of guilt behaviors, and you just mismatch all that together. It's like, I was going to swear, it's a recipe for disaster, which happens to me. So I'll continue. I'll continue, and I'll get to that for you. So I stopped working by 37, 38, 39 years old. I don't remember exactly now. And then I was focusing on my personal life, and my ex-husband and I had decided to consciously uncouple, which was, it really just is so that people grow apart.
Yeah.
We wanted different things. I had to make some decisions for myself. In that same year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Gosh.
So when you're asking me, how did I transition? I got a wake up call about 38 years old. I just couldn't walk one day. I got up out of bed. My back just went out on me. And then I got like a health crisis at the age of 42.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay, someone is trying to tell me something.
Yeah.
There is a loud message here for me. And so I did not want to do treatment. I was petrified of doing chemo.
Okay.
And it took 3 months for me to get my diagnosis back for them to come up with a treatment protocol for me. So during that time, that's a long time to sit.
That is a long time. I mean, from diagnosis, that would feel like forever to me.
Yes, forever.
Yes.
But I created it like this. Like, I created my relationship with the universe to be like this. My results aren't back because there's more work for me to do before I come back without having to do treatment. So
wow. So that superpower of yours about spinning challenge into, you know, something that you can channel into, that was huge there.
Yeah. And I was okay. I was even supposed to get my results, and they just didn't have the manpower to produce my results for me. So they were even delayed even further. I'm like, okay, universe, like, I got more work to do here. And my whole goal within that time was to understand. I learned that fear is the base root emotion, but then there's anger, resentment, judgment, all that jazz on top of it, guilt, right? So I learned that fear and anger were my two underlying emotions that I really needed to work through. Mm-hmm. And I learned that I was people pleasing and I was operating from guilt and obligation. And so I learned that I have to change those behaviors for myself. Yeah. And I also learned that I can't drive my body. I knew I had instinctually known that was an unsustainable pace for me. Yeah. But I drove it anyways. And
I mean, the hubris of our youth, right? Like, our bodies have a lot more margin, so we can get away with it for a little while, and then
that was my thought. Mm-hmm. I actually was conscious to know that I had a limited time frame to be able to run at that pace. Yeah. And I wanted to set things up in case.
Fair enough.
You know, so I just leveraged my youth that way, and my body, my mind, my heart. So to answer your question, how did I go through the transition? Well, when I was diagnosed, I got very serious in my own personal healing, and I started to recognize all these different patterns. And when I went back to get my treatment protocol, I wasn't a candidate for chemo. They wanted me to do 25 radiation treatments and 2 years of tamoxifen. Okay. And I was 42. And so for anybody listening, I think this is important for women to know. Yeah. Because I was young, women live to 80, 90 years old. I actually had a whole life still to live. And so the cancer had a chance to come. I had stage 1 breast cancer. They got it all out in the lumpectomy. It was not in my lymph node.
Thank God.
But they weren't able to detect what it was until we actually did the lumpectomy. So, which was part of why I just had such a long process. Yeah. And, maybe I needed to sit in the unknown and have that much of an imprint to commit to my transformation,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because if it would have just been a week turnaround, I might not have sat in the uncomfortableness long enough to, reprogram myself. Yeah. But they told me that doing radiation and tamoxifen would reduce the likelihood of the cancer coming back by 15%. I had a 30% chance of it recurring, and a 50%. I was just like, that doesn't sound that much to me. Like, why would I put that much toxins into my body, perhaps induce a secondary cancer, go through the type of chronic fatigue, deform my breast tissue, I have breast implants, so require another surgery. Yeah.
That seems like a lot. I mean, you're right. It's not a huge percentage of effectiveness. Yeah.
So I said, what's the chance if I do nothing? And they're like, I remember the time the doctor of radiology, I guess she is the one that does the radiation treatment. She's like, we don't take that into consideration.
Well, at least they're being honest, I guess. I don't know. Gosh.
So I was like, you're telling me if I change my thoughts, I change my behaviors, I change my patterns, I change my coping mechanisms, I change my mindset, I change my food, my water, my sleep, that there's nothing. She's like, and she walked out. Wow. So I know, right? So I was like, how much of this is like good for the system? Money. Yeah. Like, how much is, So I sat with
It's a good question. I mean, because it is, at least in America, it's a very capitalistic enterprise. Medical field is, and pharmaceutical field is. So I think that's a legit question. Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's covered by healthcare here, right? So
right.
So I sat with my oncologist. I just wasn't sitting well with me. Like, I was just like, I don't like these odds. I just don't think. I think I can do it on my own, and I didn't have a lot of support. my social support network was not on board for me to say no to treatment. Like, I even went to my breast plastic surgeon, and I had him check out my breast, and he's like, I'm thinking about not doing treatment. He's like, you will do treatment. You will listen to the doctor. And I was like, just wow. It's like, do I have any agency over my own body?
Right? Over my own body. Can we talk about it? Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I sat with my oncologist, and I was like, I would like to know the statistics if I do nothing. And he goes, Sophie, that's a completely different spreadsheet. I said, well,
can we pull it up?
Yeah, hello. And I want to impress that upon the listeners. Like, it's really, like, you hear that word cancer and the brain fritzes, like the amount of fear. If you think about where we're at on the food chain, right? Like, it's disease and war that gets the human being.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then cancer is like one of those ones. It's not like it's irritable bowel syndrome or endometriosis. Yeah. It's like this is like,
yep.
So, and I can laugh at it today, but the truth of it is like, to be able to process the information, to be able to ask the questions, to be able to connect the dots, to be able, like, to do that on your, like, that's why you have to be your own self advocate. And then I think about the people who don't speak English, right? Like, it's just like, it's sad for me. So anyways, I said to the doctor, what's the chance if I do nothing? And he goes, well, I'll get that spreadsheet. He goes, okay, this is how it works. You have an 89% chance cancer does not come back in 5 years, and then 82%, and then like that. Okay. So I was like, you're telling me if I do nothing, not even change my eating habits, my coping mechanisms, my mindset, I have an 89% chance it doesn't come back. He said yes. And so I don't understand why that's not a recommendation.
I don't understand why they would be selling the 15%, except for the word selling. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So they positioned it differently. So he positioned it like, I said, how come you don't present that as an option? Like, that's almost not fair, because I'm somebody who's okay to challenge a doctor, because a doctor has
an authority, right? Yeah. A lot of people wouldn't. They wouldn't.
Even more, I think, than just regular authority too, because now you're playing with your health, right? So I mean,
not just your health, your life, like you're playing with your life. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So he said, it's our job to keep you safe. And I'm like, but how is putting more anyways, I'm just pointing to that part of the conversation. So I said, I need to know. I need to ask this question. Am I crazy? Literally, am I crazy for thinking that if I do nothing, I'm going to be like, I got odd chances here. Like, I just need to know. And, I get emotional about it, because it's like, there was nobody who was okay with that decision for myself. Yeah. And he said, Sophie, I would actually stand behind it. And I was like, just hold the fuck. Like, I had to go through you couldn't just present that. But maybe that was, the universe's way of like sharpening up my own self-sovereignty, so that I no longer depend on somebody else to provide me with a solution, or provide me with it's okay, or permission to choose what I want to do with myself, right? Like, and I'll take it as that, that's my work. So I chose to do nothing. I said I want to get pregnant. At the time, I haven't been to every country, but I've been to several beaches across the world, and I have worn fancy shoes and drove in fancy cars, and I have lived in fancy houses. Like, I was like, what cancer really brought to the forefront? Like, what do I really want out of life? I hadn't been a mother, so I really suppressed the desire to be a mother. I used the excuse of no money, no time for a really long time. I was 43 now. I didn't have much time left to make this decision. I did not want to live with regret. I really believe it's easier to live with failure than it is to live with regret. Like, I just really believe that.
I think that's a fair statement. Mm-hmm.
So I said, I want to try. And if I do treatment, that's going to
then you can't.
I can't. So he's like, if you get pregnant, Sophie, which will increase the likelihood the cancer comes back, because you're an estrogen dominant cancer, we have to have a conversation about what it's like to be a pregnant woman who's got cancer. And I have to have that conversation, and that was like, I could feel it again. Like, when I talk about it, it was like, I want to try. I want to try. I'm going to bet on myself. And it's, the process, that process I'm explaining to you from like the divorce forward was all about betting on myself.
Yes, it was. Yes. And honoring your intuition and standing up and fighting for that intuition in the face of people that would walk away from you, that really just walked away. Okay. So I mean, like, that's a remarkable way to show up for yourself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, some of the lessons I'd like to impart upon your listeners, it's like, listen to your intuition, speak your truth, live your truth. The universe will conspire towards making that happen for you. I got pregnant 8 months after the lumpectomy. We were blessed with a baby boy. We have a 3-year-old now. His name is Zane. I went to a fertility clinic, but they didn't think that I was a candidate for it. But I was lucky because I was considered a geriatric mother, that during the pandemic, I had access to the fertility clinic, which has superior technology. There was no wait times. And I was under great care. And my, I guess he's a gynecologist, would say to me, Sophie, we have our round tables and you're having a miracle pregnancy. Like, we don't understand how you're having such a great pregnancy. And I was like, I really think this is testament to what it is to live in your truth.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what the universe is a match. Like, that's when you're
exactly.
And
I think what it is so glaring to me is it wasn't as if you chose to do nothing. You chose to do things that are not traditional to Western medicine. You chose to do mindset shifting. You chose to honor your intuition, stay in alignment. Like, I'm sure in your body mind, you were conscious of, I can't be walking around with anxiety and fear and anger in me all the time. So you did your work, right? Those are actually interventions. And they resulted in a 3-year-old that gets to be on this earth. So that's pretty amazing. But I do think that there is kind of this tendency to kind of look at all of that stuff as just, that's just the frilly extra. It's not an actual intervention. I mean, I call bullshit when people say that. I'm in the business of mind shifting. So, I mean, I studied for years and have practiced for years in that. Why isn't that an intervention? It doesn't make any sense to me that we keep selling this idea that it's not, because it truly is.
Yeah, let me break it down to you. So I started to do a lot of research and I started to understand when you're like in a negative mindset loop and you're having negative thoughts, it creates anxiety and depression and negative feelings in the body, which creates inflammation. Inflammation is a precursor to all the autoimmune diseases out there, fibromyalgia, MBS, endometriosis, even cancer.
Yeah.
And so the more negative you have, it can manifest that way. And so the caveat is everything I'm talking about absolutely is an intervention, and you have to be all in.
You have to be all in.
There cannot be doubt. Like, I didn't have doubt with that. I have doubt in lots of areas of my life. I'm not here to proclaim that my self-belief is so strong. It was strong there. I just had my relationship with the universe at that particular time, my relationship with myself, what I was up for, what I wanted to get out of my life. Like, it was just like, it's like now or never.
Right.
And I just was like, okay, this is the choice for me. And then there was no backing out of it, I didn't have an escape hatch.
No. I mean, you really were up against the wall. And you had a lifetime of lived experiences that had honed in the skill of, getting something in your crow and going with it. Like, I think that, we can't doubt that you had an ironclad mindset shifting capability that you were honoring in that, in making those choices. All of that stuff, though, is teachable. I mean, I'm sure that's why what you're going to tell us that you're doing now in your business, it's what I do in my business. Like, all of that stuff is teachable. So even those of us that haven't had lived experiences that set us up for success in shifting our mindset can learn how to do it. Like, it is a teachable thing.
Yeah, I've been doing personal development work since 2003. And so when people ask me how I had the resilience and how I had the personal power to stand in the eye of the storm and make those decisions for myself, it's like I had been already developed myself, developing myself for 20 years. Thank my younger self for putting me into that type of work and struggling then too. Because all of that served me.
It did.
When that came, I just leaned on that learning, it was already in there. So but last year I decided what was I going to do with my life. I didn't really want to go to the corporate world. It's not a speed that I like. It's just not a speed I want to be at playing in anymore, or an arena or an environment. So this working this way has been a dream of mine for a long time that I just sold out on for like a multi 6-figure contract in the corporate world. It's like, okay, like, it's just like, it's the golden handcuff.
Yes, it is the golden handcuffs. Oh, such a painful thing at this age. Because I mean, we do have to say no to some things in order to say yes to ourselves.
And being a beginner again and a learner again and starting over again and rebuilding again. And like the energy of like, that's like, it's a lot, right? So I decided I wanted to work with women. I've worked with men my entire career. Being in sales and leadership, the population of women in the top Fortune 500 companies in North America is probably 2%. Like, there just wasn't a lot of women. Not that I wouldn't work with women. They just weren't in the audience.
Right.
So now I've chosen to only work with women, and I've chosen to support them with healing their relationship with themselves and really reinventing who they are and how they show up so that they can build a life on their terms.
Yes.
And the reason is because I really I have a desire to have those deeper, more intimate conversations. It's not something that's just what fulfills me in my heart. I have a talent of connecting the dots. I've been through a lot, so I can help people process. And I wanted to go deeper than what I could do in the corporate world, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And the place I wanted to put my contribution was women.
Why women? I'm just curious what your reason is, because I also focus on women and have shared with my listeners why I do that. But I'm always curious why other people choose women.
I know at 47 years old, I know personally my own experience of what systemic oppression was for the genders.
Yes.
I know what my experience was in the corporate world. I know how that was. I know, I just know how I always wished I was a man, because I just thought it would have been easier for me to be honest.
Would have been easier, yeah.
It just would have been, like, especially with the way I show up.
Yeah.
Why women? I feel, I don't know how this is going to sound, but when I have a female mentor, which has just been recent for me, there's a level of safety that's provided that's not possible for me to experience with a man. Maybe that's a me thing.
That's amazing. Yes.
Maybe that's a me thing, but I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
So there's this primal level of safety that allows someone like me who has defense mechanism, is a high performer, A-type personality, that can drop that and be seen. And when a woman can be seen at that level, she can transform. And I believe,
agree wholeheartedly. That's a great point. I had another guest on not very long ago, Julie Noonan, who is an executive change management strategist and certified coach. And she's about a generation ahead of us in business and came out of finance. And she's like, we were, taught to be at each other's throats, like not to trust one another. So it's a journey, when you get through that to come at it differently. But I have had the experience, I'm, also 47, almost 48. Yeah. I have had that same experience where when I'm working with other women, being coached by them, not just coaching them, but being coached by them, there is that safety. You're right about that. Like, you feel heard and seen and understood in a way that you would have to do too much splaining otherwise. Then you are able to kind of, authentically show up and authentically drive yourself to do better, do, more for yourself if you want. Mm-hmm.
And men just aren't conditioned the way women are. Women aren't conditioned the way men are. I mean, I've worked with men, but I'm not sure that I could hold space for a man the same way another man could, because I don't have the same wounds. But another woman who's, a few steps ahead of me, she's going to be able to call that out in me, and I'm not going to be able to hide. And then that will create trust for me. Yeah. Because just how I am. And so how I know myself is I'm somebody who creates a safe space for someone to show up, and I can create trust very quickly. And because of my experience, I can hear it. Mm-hmm. So they can't really pull one over on me. And that woman who's like a high performer, used to not being able to be held that way, she will surrender in a way. When I mean surrender, is like she'll let go so that she can open up, so that she can then look to herself and see what she needs to work on. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a big need for that.
I think so too. I mean, obviously we're in the same business, but this is why I love having guests like you on, Sophie, because I'm also a big proponent of there's not enough of us out here helping each other, helping women in midlife. And so I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm trying to elevate all of us, because the more we're elevated and helping people, the more people are helped. And to me, that ultimately is what I want to see happen. Because I think if you lift that middle ground of women, we have our hands in our older populations, and we have our hands in the younger populations, just kind of where we're in juxtaposition in our life. And so we have this capacity to touch so many. And if we're lifted, everything we do is lifted. And so to me, that's why this population makes so much sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I also think this population, like, just the people pleasing aspect of it alone, just the not completely speaking your truth, just the not making choices and decisions that are in alignment with what you really want for yourself, regardless of who that disappoints and upsets. That is making too many women sick. There is too many. I am a representation of a young woman getting breast cancer based on that bullshit. That's what I truly believe now, and I truly believe part of the reason why I thrived through that is to continue to do that work. And I've been asking the universe to put me to work for a while now, like 5+ years, and then this is showing up, and I'm like, okay. I can't deny what I'm feeling here. I cannot deny the truth of it. I can't deny how I came out of that. And more women need to know that if a woman came to me and said, Sophie, if you keep wobbling on your boundaries, you're going to get cancer, I might have made different choices for myself.
Well, I mean, the evidence is clear, though. Like, I can't remember the authors of this study. It's a psychological study, but it was medical and psychological. But they looked at some of the commonalities of women who got cancer. Or maybe it was women and men, but individuals that got cancer. And repressed anger was one of the highest predictors of it. Repressed anger. So people who have anger about things and are not letting themselves feel their feelings, they kind of deny it and stuff it because it's not socially appropriate. This is why I think it was on women, because women tend not to express anger. And men, that tends to be what we socially condition them is the only emotion that they get to have is you get to be mad, but you don't get to be sad or any of those other things. No touchy-feely things. So, I mean, think about that. I mean, we have scientific evidence that says just that. Stop doing this. Stop people pleasing, because it is actually going to cause cancer with this percentage of a rate. And yet, that's not what we're hearing at our doctors' offices. They're more worried about, other things that are also important, like smoking and how much, birth control we took through the ages, because that's, correlated with estrogen heavy cancer growth and things. But I would like you to know if I'm suppressing my anger, and I'm not channeling that well, because I want to get help with those kinds of things before I'm up against something.
Yeah, well, the medical system doesn't really take that into consideration, but
no.
Yeah. So
no.
I think that more of us need to be speaking about it. I think my story is like to get pregnant with less than a 5% chance, 8 months after a lumpectomy, refusing treatment, like just like more women need to make decisions in alignment with who they are, what they want, not what their parents want, not what their spouse want, not what their children want. And we need to have, that's leadership. That's leadership for me.
That's leadership.
That's legacy for me. That's ending generational trauma for me. That's proper parenting for me. That's modeling for me, and that's not modeled enough.
Not enough.
And I believe that I believe it starts with women, because we, like you said, women have an opportunity to, complete some cycles with generational trauma. Maybe not break every chain there, but some. And, make sure that there's healing that happens in the legacy line after them too. And they get to stand in the face of a man and choose different partners for themselves, which is all part of the healing process, or transform the relationship they're in, and that man gets to also heal. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because if we touch other relationships, those people get lifted too. Yeah, absolutely. So you've answered all of my questions without me asking any
Yeah.
questions because your story is remarkable and exactly you are an individual in your situation is the ideal client that I serve. And now you're on the other side of that, serving other people. Yay, you.
Thank you.
One little question though, before we close with, your business and where my listeners can find you is just any nugget of wisdom that you would want to impart on a woman who's in the early parts of this, maybe, getting the cancer diagnosis, losing the job because she can't sustain it physically in her body anymore. In that kind of hardship phase of this, what would be your nugget of wisdom for her?
Yeah. So it's an opportunity for you to listen to what your body needs and wants right now. Your body's communicating to you. You have time to correct it, to course correct, to pivot, to shift. And it's up to you to decide that you're worth that. Nobody else is going to give you permission. No one else is going to do anything to support that process. You need to lead the charge. You need to be your own self-advocate. And
so Sophie Deslauriers is giving us a big permission slip. That's what I'm hearing.
Give you permission to, yes, and a warning too. If you're in your early 40s and this is where you're at, like, and this is the way the body is breaking down, and this is how it's communicating. What's it going to tell you at 60? And what do you want for 60? And, I have a 3-year-old and I want to be climbing mountains and riding bikes and swimming next to him. I'll be 5 years cancer-free in June. So I want you to know it's possible, but it starts with you.
Starts with you. Yeah. That's a great message. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your business and where we can find you.
The easiest place to find me is my Instagram page. So it's at Sophie Deslauriers. So TheSophieDeslauriers. I have there's 2 ways to work with me one-on-one, and that's a customized package depending on what you want to work on. And then the second way is my signature program is called the Reinvention process. Actually, starting a session on February the 13th.
Okay.
And it's really about supporting and mentoring women to transform how they show up in life, how they communicate, how they express themselves, up-leveling their standards, communicating, enforcing their boundaries, creating a new vision, a new identity for themselves, talking about emotional regulation, how to forgive, most importantly, forgive themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something we don't talk a lot about, and really just communication. So it's a body of work that I've created, and however you work with me, that's the body of work.
That's the body of work. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Reinventing ourselves is a really beautiful way to say it. I was talking to another podcast guest not too long ago about that, I think we also don't want to negate where we have been in our lives. So, midlife is a place for our generative drive to kind of take us in a new personal development avenue in our life. And our other former life also is a big part of who we are today. So, don't say but, say and. It's like I did this and now I'm going here in my midlife. I'm making different choices. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Celebrate yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Me too. It was great.
Yeah. I have nothing left to say, but just amazing. I know that you heard Sophie's story and were identifying with parts of it. I mean, listen, all the things have happened to this person. And so the chances that there was some parallel there of being in the face of adversity at some point during your life and how you might pivot out of that, man, she's got it. She's got it cornered. If you go to the show notes, you can certainly be linked to her if you would like to do further work with her. And the work that I'm doing at learntoloveyourstory.com and the group coaching that I'm starting up again in 2024, all of that can help you address these same issues. If you're people pleasing and self-neglecting and really kind of at a level in your life where you've put yourself last so many times that your body is shutting down, that your mind is shutting down, that your Your will is shutting down. You're just not enjoying the things that once were enjoyable. Man, if that's where you're at and you think, hey, I don't want to do the midlife crisis. I'd prefer to be able to restructure this into a centered life thriving. Then keep listening to this podcast because that's why I made it. It was for you. I know that we can help you find that centered life thriving.
Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these 2 crisis resources. They're available to anybody.
Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone,
text HOME, home, to 741-741.
to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.